Hey guys, it's Matt from Surf City TCG. We got big news this morning. Final Fantasy commanders just revealed. So I've got them all on the screen here. We've got Terra, Herald of Hope in Mardu colors, Cloud, ex-Soldier in Maya colors, Tidus, Yuna's Guardian in Bant colors, and Yustola, Knight's Blessed in Esper colors. So how do these commanders look? Which one do I think will be the best, most popular? How do they all stack up? Stay tuned. So before I dive into analyzing these commanders, I want to say right off the bat that I'm a longtime old school Final Fantasy player. I played Final Fantasy 1, 2, and 3. I know that they're numbered a little bit differently in the US versus Japan, etc. But the ones I played were on NES, which was the original Final Fantasy 1. Final Fantasy 2, I believe, was on Super Nintendo. And then there was like Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, which was kind of a weird side one. And then Final Fantasy 3 was the big one, in the US at least, and that was my favorite. And that's where we get Terra from. The Final Fantasies that came out after the first three, I'm not nearly as familiar with. I did play a little bit of 7, but I was pretty turned off by the weird graphics and the, kind of pixelated 3D sort of look, and was such a huge Super Nintendo fan that this felt like such a departure for me that I just never really followed through and played the others. So apologies if I'm missing some references with regard to what these cards are, how to pronounce them, anything like that, but I am only familiar with, at least very familiar with the Final Fantasy games through the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. So that all being said, let's get into it. We've got Terra, Herald of Hope. She's a 3-mana, 3/3 human wizard warrior for a red, a white, and a black. She's got Trance, which is at the beginning of combat on your turn, mill 2 cards, and Terra gains flying until end of turn. Okay, a little bit weird combo there, but fine. Whenever Terra deals combat damage to a player, you may pay 2 colorless, can return target creature with power 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So, interesting set of abilities here. She's a Mardu self-mill commander that's looking to reanimate small creatures, not necessarily low mana value like we've seen with something like Alesha who smiles at death, but this focuses specifically on low power creatures. So I have a Mirko Obsessive Theorist commander who cares about having creatures that are low power, and that deck plays a lot of clones because they're 0 power, but there are also a lot of other just powerful cards that are low power but not necessarily low mana value. And looking for that combination is where you're going to really find success playing something like Terra. If you've got a 8 mana creature, but it's a 3/6 or something, that's really where it's at when it comes to a card like Terra, because you can really take advantage of that. Looking for a low power, but still getting a very effective ability in reanimation. This is going to make for a very unique commander deck, I think. It's going to be something unlike we've ever seen before. Like I said, the closest thing is that I can think of is Alesha who smiles at death, but that's really a very aggressive, like weenie style deck, whereas this can be that, but if you wanted to do that, you're probably just better off playing Alesha. I think Terra is more going to look to focus on what kind of like really powerful cards can I find that are really just quite effective. So I'm going to spend just a quick minute using Scryfall Search, and if you haven't seen my deck building series where I build a commander deck completely from scratch, I go over a ton of this stuff, how to use the Scryfall Search, a lot of this stuff in detail. I will link that series here for you to check out. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time explaining what I'm doing here, but let's just drop back to the main deck. And these commanders are not available in Moxfield yet. I just put in some random Mardu cards for now, but we can't use the EDH rec functionality when there's not a commander set. But what we can do is use the Scryfall Advanced Search. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select one of these other cards to be the commander, just so it knows that we're playing Mardu colors, and then my searches will not reveal cards that are outside of this color identity. So what I'm going to do is I already have my Moxfield defaulting to order by EDH rec. But if you don't, you're just going to want to add this string at the beginning of whatever you're doing. And this is going to sort the results so that the ones that it shows first are the most popular cards from EDH Rec, which is a data aggregator that kind of scrapes deck lists from all over the internet and says, like, what are most people playing most commonly? So as we can see, if we're just ordering by EDH Rec with no other, filters on our search, number one card is Sol Ring. Shocker. So what are we looking for? So we're looking for creatures that are power 3 or less, right? And the mana value doesn't matter. But, to find the cards that might be interesting, let's just put a filter that says, let's take a look at mana value greater than 5, meaning this is going to show us mana value 6 and up. And then power less than 4, meaning 3 and below. And then don't forget, it's going to automatically give us the most popular EDH Rec results first. So let's see what we've got. And these are the kind of cards that are going to be really good in Terra. This is just a very quick glance at what kind of great options are going to be available for Terra. So Meteor Golem, this is a good one. Just a nice piece of flexible removal. We've got Marionette Master as a nice possible finisher. Aurelia the War Leader, very strong card. Give us 2 combats, just a big threat in and of itself. Keurig if we want to cheat a bunch of black mana pips. More removal and duplicate, and the list goes on and on and on. And this is only looking at mana value 6 and higher creatures. We could lower this by even more, right? We could say, let's look at 5 and higher. Let's look at 4 and higher. It doesn't really matter. We don't have to have the mana value string there on at all. We could just say, let me see all creatures power less than 4. The only problem with this sort of search is it's not knowing that we're looking for necessarily the best creatures that are power less than 4. So it's just going to show us the most popular via EDH Rec. So Solemn Simulacrum is going to be number 1. Yep. Shocker. This is the kind of advanced search we can do to help really nail down what would be good in this deck. Let's move on to the next commander on the list. That is Cloud X Soldier. Cloud's a 5 mana, 5 casting costs. He's a 4/4 human soldier mercenary. This is Naya colors, so he's 2, a red, a green, and a white. You get a 4/4 haste, and when he enters, attach up to 1 target equipment you control to it. So he automatically equips a weapon that's in play when he enters, which is nice. And then when he attacks, you're going to draw a card for each equipped attacking creature you control. And then if his power is 7 or greater, you also create 2 treasure tokens. So this is clearly meant to be an equipment tribal deck because it cares about having multiple equipped creatures that are also attacking. Very aggressive style deck. I don't know if there are really many, if any, Naya equipment decks. There may be 1 or 2, but I think this is a fairly unique direction for Naya colors. Cloud is going to encourage you to play a bunch of equipment related cards, and white and red colors are very familiar with equipment based strategies, but adding in green is actually really nice because it gives us ways to ramp out a lot of mana and then also cheat some equip costs. So even though Cloud costs kind of a lot, he's 5 mana, he comes in with haste, he auto attaches an equipment, so he does end up saving you some mana in the long run. So this deck's going to be looking for lots of good equipment, right? And especially stuff that is maybe a little expensive to equip. It's going to be really good on Cloud. Picking a cue for Modern, Cloud could equip something like Colossus Hammer and just get to smashing, right? He's got haste. He's going to equip that thing automatically, and bam, someone's getting hit for 14 right off the bat. So it looks like a really powerful and fun one. Tidus, Yuna's Guardian. This is Bant colors. So 3 mana for a 3/3. It's 1 green, 1 white, and 1 blue to cast. You get a 3/3 human warrior that says, at the beginning of combat on your turn, you may move a counter from target creature you control onto a second target creature you control. So you can't move counters to other players' creatures, only your own. So no finality counter cheating here. But this is going to encourage you to play some unique counters, perhaps, in addition to the obvious +1/+1 counters. And then he's got an ability called Cheer, which says, whenever 1 or more creatures you control with counters on them deal combat damage to a player, you may draw a card and proliferate. Do this only once each turn. So a little weird that they have this do this only once each turn in combination with the text whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player. So if it didn't have that do this only once each turn, this would allow you to trigger it once per opponent, because that's how this text usually works when it says 1 or more creatures you control deal damage to a player. But it doesn't say deal damage to 1 or more players, like on something like Nelly Borka. I just learned someone left me a comment and said, hey, Nelly Borka doesn't work on multiple opponents, which I hadn't realized, but that was a good call out. Tidus I don't know if they're changing the wording or they're trying to prevent shenanigans where you're doubling triggers. So like if you have a roaming throne out that would normally double the triggers of Tidus, it's not going to work. It will double it, but it's not going to. The second one won't work because it says do this only once each turn. So like literally you cannot do it again, even if you have a way you're copying the ability or something. So Tidus is a Bant counters deck. So think something like Galadriel. And Galadriel is obviously going to slot in really well to a deck like Tidus, aside from the fact that you're mixing universes. But I digress. And I think plenty of people have complained about that already. You know, personally, I don't really care. Magic's called The Gathering for a reason. It's always been a mishmash of worlds and players and characters and stuff. So I don't terribly mind that they're like bringing in other IP because Magic's, like I said, always kind of been like that. And this isn't really that new to me. Obviously, it is a little weird seeing these specific characters that we know from other games, but you know, whatever. That's just the way of the world nowadays. Like, look at all these Marvel Universe movies and how they're mishmashing everything together. So, anyway, enough on that. I think Tidus is a very powerful one. He's going to let you put unique counters on creatures. Like, if you've got ways to put indestructible counters, you know, if you're playing those gods like Mondrak that can get an indestructible counter, then you can move those counters to your other creatures, and that's very, very powerful. And then some cards give things like flying counters or menace counters or lifelink counters. And it seems like they're doing more and more of that. So I expect that Tidus Yuna's Guardian is going to be a card that gets more and more powerful as the game progresses and as they start kind of exploring this world of other counters that aren't +1 counters. And now that's not to say that +1 counters aren't going to be great in this deck, and you're going to play tons of cards that revolve around +1 counters too, because you really want to trigger that sheer ability that says, you know, you get to draw a card and proliferate. The proliferate's huge because if you don't remember or know what proliferate is, it's anything that has a counter on it or any person that has a counter, you can add one to it. So you could play Tidus as a poison commander and infect all of your opponents and then proliferate those counters. You could play him as an energy commander where you're getting energy counters and you can proliferate those. You can play experience counters and proliferate those. These are all the kind of weird things you can do with proliferate. But then the most common thing you're going to do is play +1 counters. And like, if you've got a counter on your whole team, hey, guess what? You're getting another counter on all of your whole team. And if you have a Hardened Scales out, when you proliferate, not everything's not just getting one +1 counter, it's getting 2. If you have an Innkeeper's Talent that's leveled up to level 3, your counters are getting +1, and instead of +1, they're getting doubled. So tons of ways to kind of go nuts with a commander like Tidus. And in Bant colors, which is a very high value and high potency color combination, this is going to be a very, very strong one. So look out for Tidus. Last but not least, my personal favorite in terms of what I'm looking forward to playing the most, Y'shtola. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Y'shtola. It's either Y'shtola, something like that. Let me know in the comments if you know. Y'shtola Knight's Blessed. This is Esper Commander. It's a cat warlock. So what does this kitty do? She's a white, blue, and black, 4 mana for a 2/4 vigilance, cat warlock. At the beginning of each end step, so not just your end step, but each end step, if the player lost 4 or more life this turn, you draw a card. It does say a player. That counts you. It doesn't just have to be an opponent. So you can pay life if you have black market connections and you full send as one does. That's 6 life you've paid. So boom, you're drawing a card, another card on your end step. And then whenever you cast a non-creature spell with mana value 3 or greater, Y'shtola deals 2 damage to each opponent and you gain 2 life. Very cool. So basically, it can trigger its own end step ability by you just casting 2 non-creature spells that are mana value 3 or greater on any given turn, right? So if you played 2, everyone has taken 4 and you've gained 4, and then a player has lost 4 or more life that turn, so you're going to draw a card once you reach the end step. So this is just an Esper value commander. I mean, there are certainly going to be tons of ways to go infinite and just win with Y'shtola, but that's not anything that's unique or special. I think in general, what this deck is looking to do is just play a very typical kind of control, draw, go style strategy where you can trigger this ability on other turns as well, that's when it gets really crazy. If you're playing my favorite card of all time, Shadow of the Second Sun, then you can trigger her on your turn, untap all your permanents at the end step, and then trigger it again on an opponent's turn, maybe even twice on 2 different opponents' turns, depending how much mana you have. So this is just a deck that's looking to play very few creatures and very many mana value 3 or greater non-creature spells. So just a lot of removal, a lot of counter magic, just a very typical control deck that's really going to seek to just have Y'shtola out, prevent yourself from dying via effects like Propaganda, Ghostly Prison, Collective Restraint, and various other Pillow Fort kind of cards, because you're not going to be playing a lot of creatures. You want your deck to be filled with non-creature spells, and you want to just be pinging everyone down until like all of a sudden they're all very low, and you're like, okay, I cast this last flurry of spells to kind of just win the game, right? Every non-creature spell you play, mana value 3 or greater, it's going to be pinging everyone for 2. So if you could chain those together, if you're playing a bunch of ones that refund you mana when you play them, like Frantic Search, Treachery, like any of these cards, especially if you have some sort of engine where you're drawing a card when you cast a spell, that's when this really gets crazy. This is going to be a great deck for a creature like a new Archmage of Ruins. Same with like something like Archmage Emeritus, which is an old standard, but going to be very, very good in this deck. So you're not going to play many creatures, but the ones you do play are going to want to kind of refuel you or provide some sort of engine in that way. So pretty cool set of cards here. I'm really excited to play these. I think Y'shtola is the one that I will probably build first, although I think Cloud looks really cool. They all look really cool, I think. They have really interesting, unique abilities. I feel like none of these are really that similar to any commander that already exists, which is awesome. They all have their own niche and will be unique and fun. So hope you enjoyed this little sneak preview. Stay tuned, and if you haven't already, drop me a like, drop me a subscribe, and share my videos. I'm trying to build my channel. And join my Discord. We've got live discussions, deck help, rules questions, all sorts of stuff. And it's a pretty active community we've got going. So look forward to seeing you there. I'll link that in the description below. But thanks for watching, and have a great day.